Hello, and welcome back to Woes of a Witch podcast. I am your host, Emma Witchbrook, and I am so excited to have you here today. It has been a long time. It has been over 2 years since I've made a podcast episode. Um, so obviously, many things have changed, as I think all people change a lot in 2 years, but especially someone who is a devotee of Persephone. I mean, there's been a lot of changes. So I think that that's what this episode is going to be about is just like all the things that have changed in my life, in my practice since March 2024, which was my very last episode. And also just some reflections on change, some ways to process change and exist within change in a magical practice, talking about change from a magical perspective, but then also giving you guys some ideas of some rituals that I have done or will be doing to honor change. I think that we're in a moment of change right now, right? Like in so many ways, but we'll keep it focused on seasonality right now. Just getting back into it. But yeah, I mean, May is such a moment of change, right? Like we're kind of on that threshold of we're still very much in spring and things are blooming and every week there's a new flower that's bloomed, but also we're inching closer and closer to summer, so the transitional moments of spring and fall, depending on where you are located in the world of where you're listening to this, are always moments of thresholds of transition, of ebbing and flowing. So I thought, what a better no better time to to rip the Band-Aid off and just get back into it. So yeah, we're gonna talk about just what's changed for me in my life, some musings around change in general from a magical paradigm, a magical worldview, and then some ideas on rituals for change. And then we're gonna end out this episode the way that I plan to end every episode with a pull from my Oracle deck, Mirror Muse. And I'm also going to talk to you about what I have planned for this kind of revival of my podcast, this hopefully deepening of a commitment to my podcast, and yeah, what the future holds, which I think is a really exciting thing that change offers us, right? Like a momentum to dream, to plan, to manifest, to desire. So thanks for being here. And let's get into it. So I think first it's fitting that I reintroduce myself. Maybe you are listening to this podcast for the very first time, or maybe you are someone who used to listen to my podcast in 2024 or before then. But nonetheless, I am Emma. Um, it is lovely to meet you. I'm glad that you're here in this space. I am a tarot reader, a deck creator, a magical mentor, an energy healer, a designer, a creative, and above all else, I am a witch. And this is my podcast, Woes of a Witch, where we talk about the life of a magical being and all of that rolls within it, whether that be woes or whimsy or witchcraft itself, right? Um, so yeah, I am located in New York. I have recently celebrated my birthday. I am an Aries. I have a Leo moon and a Sagittarius rising, so I'm a triple fire. Among magic and witchcraft, some of my other loves are collage, textiles, poetry. I love making jewelry. I'm a big fan of nature. I am a devotee of Persephone and Hades. I have a very close tie to seasonal shifts in my magical practice and also my lifestyle. I'm really into food.
I'm a foodie, but I'm also really into TCM, or traditional Chinese medicine, two things that have really supported me in my life. I'm chronically ill, so those things help support me. And I think both of being into TCM and being into food also coincide with living seasonally and the work that I do magically. Um, I am a chaos witch, a modern pagan, and a space holder. And that's those are all the those are all the names that I'm going to throw out for myself at this moment in time. So I want to talk about, just a couple of things, both mundane and magical, that have shifted in my life since March of 2020, just to kind of like ground myself into all that's shifted, but also to for us to kind of build a little bit more of a knowledge and a connection. So the biggest thing I think that is different is that I have created my own Oracle deck, Mirror Muse Oracle. This has been a huge project that I am extremely proud of, and I am really extremely grateful and like just filled with a lot of love and gratitude for how it's been received in the world. And I did a Kickstarter for this last summer and received in the production in February, and it's just been such a surreal experience to see it in the world alive, like having its own life and working with people in their practice, and like, people putting my deck on their altar and like doing magic with it and using it to like figure out what they need to figure out, like pretty much just doing what it was meant to do. But it's been an incredible experience, and I think it's changed me a lot. It's a dream I've had for a very long time, was to create my own deck. And to have a dream that you envision to be something really like kind of down the road, and then stumble upon it, stumble into doing it sooner than you thought, um, is such an interesting moment. It's such an interesting experience to say, like, oh, I always thought I would do this, and now I've done it, and now what? Well, now what is that there's other things that I can do and create, and other decks being a part of that, obviously. But that changes you in itself. Creating something, creating anything changes you. It changes the world. But creating something that is a tool for transformation for others and myself. I mean, I experienced transformation from my own deck, right? There is so much shift in that, and yeah, it's really meaningful. Um, some other things that have happened since 2024. I've had two solar returns since then. I survived two Saturn, um, 2 years where Saturn was my Time Lord, so two Saturn ruled perfection years in a row. I've traveled. I've been to Salem twice. I spoke at a conference in Salem, which was a really big accomplishment for me. I got new tattoos. My last living grandparent, my grandmother, died. I started and almost even ended a relationship with the Morrigan through the process of the grief of my grandmother. I started reading fiction again. I put out a poetry book. I made new friends. I expanded my astrology knowledge. I am solo traveling for the first time this year, which is not something that's changed yet. But when I was writing my notes, I wasn't sure when I was going to record this. But yeah, I've done um, a ton of magic, and things have changed a lot in my magical practice. As I mentioned, I've had some new deities kind of weave in and out. My relationship with the deities I do work with have woven in and out and shifted. One of the episodes that I had made in the past was like a story about Hecate, and like how we have this kind of touch and go relationship, and that continues to be a go. Like, there's so many shifts, and part of what has reinvigorated my desire to reconnect through my podcast is making a new friend who many of you may know, Serena St. Sinclair, who is a lovely person and amazing content creator who I highly recommend you check out, especially if you are a Persephone devotee. But me and Serena became friends, and she listened to my podcast episode on Persephone and shared so many lovely insights with me that she had about the podcast episode. And so I re listened to the podcast episode I did 2 years ago and was like, whoa, so many things are different. So many things have changed. And then we kind of continued that conversation about what has changed over on her YouTube channel. So I highly recommend you checking that out. But one of the things that was a huge shift is that I am a person who historically has really struggled with change. Um, and I think that when I recorded that episode 2 years, that was more than 2 years ago because that wasn't the last episode I did, but over 2 years ago, I was in a really extreme moment of shift. Like one thing had changed and it was kind of trickling. It was a very tower moment for me. A lot of things were trickling around that. And I was really scared. I didn't know what was going to happen. There was so much uncertainty, so much unknown. And I was like, fuck this change. Like I was not excited about it. And since then, this experience included, I've experienced a lot of change that has only opened up different horizons for me, expanded, helped me grow. I have evidence now from the last couple of years that change is that any change coming in is coming in for my own greater good. And I don't think that's something that, like, I say that as a truth for me right now, but I know that that's not always true and it's not always true all the time. Like there's so much nuance in that. But in general, just to kind of simplify this, um, in the past I felt change is bad, and now I feel change is opportunity and change is expansion. And there's less of a binary of like positive and negative, although I feel more positive about it now because I don't fear it. Um, which, speaking of binaries, that was another thing that I had mentioned in this podcast episode, is that working with Persephone has really helped me um, dismantle black and white thinking. That was like a really big problem for me 2 years ago. And when I re-listened to that episode and spoke about it with Serena, I really realized that, like, wow, that's actually not a huge problem for me anymore, which is amazing. Like it's really cool to like go back and recognize my growth, like it's like reading a journal again. So I'm really grateful for that experience, and for Serena to have catalysted that for me. And I think it's really special because we're both Persephone devotees. And again, there's this like connection of transformation and change that comes with that. So yeah, a lot has changed, but a lot of things have stayed the same. Obviously, I still work with Hades and Persephone. Um, I still practice a lot of magic consistently. I still have the same job, even though that job looks different. And I still have the same partner, even though that partnership looks different. So I think, in these reflections, it's just really interesting to think about how change is a spectrum in itself, right? Like, and I think for me, that's the difference too between like the wording of change and transformation. Like transformation to me feels like something gradual over time that continues to alchemize and shift, whereas change is like more swift, more tower, kind of more movement happening. But either way, there's a spectrum and there's nuance to all of it. Um, you can have change in your relationship but still be in the same relationship. You can have a complete change of living situation, of career, of heart, but also feel the same or look the same. There's a lot of nuance there. So I want to share a story, a musing that my partner and I had come up with quite a while ago. I would say even over 2 years ago, but me and my partner were riffing off each other in a spiritual, magical way. My partner is incredibly intelligent, very mercurial, and has a lot of amazing philosophy knowledge, and is super into magic, although isn't fully a practitioner, but dabbles and it entertains me. And yeah, and so we had this really interesting about revelation slash musing slash idea about something that we decided to call alchemical sheddings. So essentially, what we said and what this is that as we change, like alchemy, like the process of turning lead to gold, there are metal sheddings that like physically and literally happen from that, right? Like there is debris, whether that's physical or psychic, that falls away so that we can begin anew, like a phoenix rising from the ashes, right? So our idea is that the things that shed, the psychic debris that sheds from us as we transform as a person, has its own life and maybe even consciousness, and is almost a poltergeist of sorts. For those who are unfamiliar with what a poltergeist is like a ghost, but like not a actual spirit. It's more of like when something traumatic has happened in a space, there is like a psychic energy that lingers there that creates what's called a poltergeist. So it's different than like an actual spirit being trapped somewhere. It's just like the psychic debris that like um culminates into some sort of consciousness, right? So our idea is that as we change, as people, as living people, um, parts of us shed and parts of us fall away, and those sheddings become poltergeists and become these um, egregores slash poltergeists, these things that exist in the psychic and astral realms. And to go even further with that, we started thinking about that our cats, if you're already like, what the hell are you talking about? Just skip like 3 minutes or 5 minutes or something, like maybe you're just like, I wanted to like drink my coffee and have like a chill podcast and this girl's like really talking about some crazy shit. If it's not for you, it's not for you, and that's okay. But for those that it's gonna click with, I think you're really gonna like it. So essentially, these alchemical sheddings happen. That's what we're calling them, the alchemical sheddings. They happen, and then our idea was that like our cats are the embodiment of our alchemical shedding. So essentially these parts of ourselves that have come away, these parts of ourselves that have healed, like that we've healed parts of, or that we've outgrown, like a mixture of like our shadow and our inner child, and like a tinge of like a phase that we had that we grew out of, right? Like all of these things kind of cultivating and coming together to create a being that is our cats. Because like we were just saying that like we have two cats. We both had a cat before we lived with each other, and now we live together, and we both have both cats. But you know, when we came up with this, we didn't live together, so it was like over 5 years ago actually that we were talking about. It was a long time ago that we were talking about this, but it's something that's really stuck with me because I love it. I think it's so fun, and I think you guys are going to love it too. But essentially, my cat can be a little sassy. My cat Evie, she can really like just go on her own. She has like a tendency to like isolate and like be a little cranky, a little sassy. Like that's her shadow side. And I really see my younger self in that. I'm like, oh, that's like my inner teen. My inner teen is embodied in my cat because my inner teen, as she grew up, had her alchemical sheddings come off, and then they cultivated into my cat. It's wild, it's silly, it's chaos magic, it's fun. Anyway, this is just something I wanted to share with you because I think it's really interesting. But as I'm in this moment of transition and change, I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about, and I don't think it's this thing where it's like, okay, the sheddings fall away and then they continue to build like a rubber band ball or something into like this big thing. Like the sheddings happen after a big transformation, and then they kind of like form together and create a being. And then like later on, 10 years later, the last 10 years of shedding. So you know what I mean? Like it's very flowing, and there's like nuance, and also like it's an idea. I'm not saying it's real. I'm not saying it exists. It's just something that I think is interesting to think about and brings me joy and inspiration. So anyway, as I'm in a moment of transition and change, I'm thinking about this. I'm thinking about this idea. And this kind of leads me into what I would say our first spell suggestion, magical suggestion is um, this is really for only like if you resonate with this idea. If you're like, I'm into that, I want to explore that, the other ones won't have anything to do with this, I promise. But essentially, essentially, what I've done in the past and what I might do again, what I will do again, is I have written a story, a short story, from the perspective of my alchemical shedding. So I think that this is like a little heady, so I'm going to give you some more information, hopefully to ground it. And if you want to hear the story, let me know. Maybe I would share it, maybe I wouldn't, I don't know. But I essentially wrote this story from the perspective of this like angsty little fire fairy. Um, and I just channeled a lot of my inner teen into that character, and she was my alchemical shedding. Like I envisioned what my alchemical shedding was, and it was this little fire fairy, and I wrote a story about her from her perspective. And in the story I explain she a part of her angst is that she is an alchemical shedding. She's like, what am I, not even real? Like it's very existential, it's very silly, it's very sassy. And so that is my first idea for you, is to think about this idea if it resonates with you, create a character, create a poltergeist that is embodying your alchemical shedding, and then write something from the perspective of that creature, of that thing. Maybe that is, and you could, have so much fun with this. Like maybe for you, it's like a symbol. Maybe it's not like a whole being. Like maybe that's not how this resonates with you, right? Write a poem, write a short story, write a novel, like I don't know, make a D&D character inspired by it, like whatever you want to do. This is my idea, is to take this thing that me and my partner came up with and build on it on your own in a creative way. If you wanted to build on that more magically, what you could do is that you could, while you are writing this, kind of do a transmutation spell. So essentially, transmutation magic is when we're taking one thing and we're moving it into another thing. So a good example of transmutation would be like if you are getting tickets on your car, like if you're just getting a bunch of parking tickets, to transmute the parking tickets into like good luck or something like that. You know what I mean? Or if you feel like you're getting a lot of like negative feedback or like evil eye, like transmuting that into making new friends, making positive connections. That's an example of a transmutation spell that I've done in the past. So what you could do is you could use the process of writing this story about the alchemical shedding as transmutation magic. You could say, maybe you feel like you're like for me, I'm talking about my inner teen, right? Like that's like quite some time ago, but maybe you feel like you're in the process of transformation. You feel like you're starting to, you got the sheddings on you. They're not they're not falling away. You're just like scaly and like shedding, right? So maybe this process helps you move through that transformation a little bit more. It helps you kind of ground into it. It can also just be this thing where you're like, I'm changing, and this is the part of me that's being transmuted, and I want to change this energy into something else. Um, but it can also just be less linear, right? Like transmutation magic doesn't have to be like related to the thing you're doing. Like parking tickets and luck, like okay, sure, we're kind of like on the luck spectrum, like bad luck, good luck. But like you don't have to transmute it into the change. You could just say, okay, transformation's happening and I'm transmuting that into like getting a raise, like taking that energy and moving it into something else. Like we're talking about alchemy here in like a lot of different ways, right? That's what transmutation magic is, that's what the alchemical shedding is. Like we're literally making one thing into a completely different thing, so they don't have to be super related. Another idea I have around the alchemical shedding is to like kind of make the alchemical shedding character into a servitor, and then that servitor can do whatever you want it to do, whatever you need it to do. But I think it would be good to like help you facilitate the change, help that part of you, like let's say this is like a part of you that you've grown out of, like, have the servitor exist as a way to kind of keep that separate from you, if that makes sense. Again, these are just ideas. You can play around with them, you can build on them. There's a lot here that can be played with. Okay. So we're moving on. We're moving on from the alchemical shedding. um The next spell suggestion that I have for you would be to work with Persephone or Hades. Again, this doesn't have to be specific to Persephone or Hades, but I'm going to kind of explain it that way, and then you can see what other beings, deities you work with that kind of like would work with that for you. There's so many deities that are connected to transformation. I also, again, don't feel like things need to be literal in that way. Like you can just work with whatever being feels good for you or no being at all, you know? But essentially, with Persephone particularly, obviously she is a goddess of transformation. She goes through many transformations herself. And so a good way to kind of work with her magically would be to take on the god form of Persephone and do some sort of initiation ritual. Um, when Persephone goes into the underworld, it is the moment that she eats the pomegranate seeds that solidifies the change from Kore, the goddess of spring, into Persephone, queen of the underworld. So I highly recommend kind of eating something to create that initiation for you. So as you kind of step into the role of Persephone, to have pomegranate seeds or something else that maybe is more specific to the transformation that you're going through that kind of ties with that. And then to have the working be that the ingestion of this um, food, plant, drink, whatever it is, creates the transformation. And this is something that we see in so many myths, stories. You know, this is even something in Alice in Wonderland, which like there's a lot of crossover between Persephone and Alice in Wonderland, but um where we see someone ingesting something that creates transformation, that is an initiation to transformation. So again, I'm describing something with Persephone because that's who I work with, but this can really be, I mean, you could do this as like a kind of a pop culture thing, like working with Alice in Wonderland archetype. You could do this in so many ways. But this idea of like creating an initiation ritual for yourself around ingesting something um, is idea number two for transformation magic. So, idea number three is around the idea of glamour magic. So, this I think is really good for like, I'm going to express two different things. I think it's really good to do glamour magic when you feel like you've changed, but then you don't feel like other people are treating you like you changed. So it's good to do glamour magic around like having people perceive you the way that you now have transformed, like having that be clear and understood. Um, but another way is kind of going the opposite. Like you really want to change, but you feel like it's not happening, like you're working towards some sort of change. You can do glamour magic for that perception as well. So let's say you are really trying to like you're trying to be someone who has a routine, like a morning routine, a night routine, like more structure in your life, like you're really wanting to do that. um you can do glamour magic for people to perceive you in the way that someone who has that, right? Like, oh, like it seems like you really have everything, you're really good at time management. You're really good at that. Maybe this is not the best example for glamour magic, but you see what I'm saying. Like there is glamour magic is a tool that then can help perception be a part of the transformation process, whether that's the way we perceive ourselves, the way that other people perceive us, or the way that we want to be perceived in the world. The next suggestion is around the future. So we're talking a lot about like being in transformation and magic to do when you're in the process or starting the process or almost done with the process, but let's talk about the future. And so I think that like astral travel or meditation can be really helpful for this. So you can kind of do a meditation and astral travel where you go visit a different version of yourself in the future, or even in the past, right? Like if there's something that you're really trying to work on that's like rooted in, you know, your inner teen, you kind of maybe want to go talk to that inner teen and be like, okay, hey, like we're letting go of this. Like why don't you give this thing to me so I can do some magic and let go of it, right? Like this can be a maybe good precursor to some other kind of ritual stuff that you're doing. Um I like that idea of like retrieving like a physical kind of symbol or talisman in the meditative world of a like that represents something that you want to change, and then kind of maybe doing some magic, but either in the astral realm or physically in this realm to kind of dissipate that, to kind of banish that, move past it. There's a lot that you could do there. And then with the future, you could also, like, let's say you're really struggling to shift something, you're really struggling in a relationship and you really want to move out of a certain phase in a relationship, you feel like you've changed, that person hasn't changed, you're like having a hard time fitting together, you can kind of visit your future self, maybe. And I think like working with like divination here, being in an altered state is like really, really helpful. But it's even something you could do in a therapeutic space with hypnosis. If you got a therapist that's down with this type of thing, I think that could be really cool. But essentially going to your future self and saying, hey, this is something I'm really struggling with. Like, how do we transform it? Or, how can I step into your shoes to have to figure out how to work through this, or how I've already worked through this, right? Because time's not real. Like all these things are happening at once anyway. I was not anticipating to get so heady in this episode, but you know what? I'm rolling with it. I hope you guys are too. So those are some ideas about meditation and parts work, like different versions of yourself that have existed or will exist. And kind of on that note, this is similar to the last one, but like a different perspective, right? So, like in the last example, we're talking about the past self and the future self, but there's a lot of parts of us, right? Like we have a lot of different parts that exist within us. We have a lot of archetypes that exist both within us, but also within the world. I'm looking at you, Carl Jung. There is a lot of different ways that we can channel a vision for what we want to transform into, where we want to go. So essentially, I think that this kind of helps you create more of a narrative and have more control in transformation. So I think that this particularly can be, this one and the last one can be really helpful tools for like if you feel like change is happening that you're not consenting to, like things are happening around you and you're like, what's happening? I don't like this. You can kind of be like, okay, like who would handle this well? How do I want to show up as this? I want to show up as the Queen of Pentacles. I want to show up grounded, secure, stable, unshaken in my abundance, unshaken in my gratitude. I'm going to channel the Queen of Pentacles and I'm going to do a ritual or I'm going to do magic where I step into that Queen of Pentacles tarot card archetype. You can also think about this as the archetype of um, just I'm totally drawing a blank right now. I'm totally drawing a blank right now. Maybe you want to deal with change as like the outlaw, right? Like as like a radical archetype, as someone who really kind of thrives off of it, builds something new, dismantles a system. This can be really interesting for like activism magic, or to just motivate you in your real world activism, right? Like how can you play with archetypes, whether they're through tarot, they're through Jungian archetypes, they're through just storybook, fable archetypes, or even just through different parts of yourself that you resonate with, like the higher self, the lower self, the shadow. Like, how can you play with all of these different masks, all of these different embodiments of self to your advantage in your moment of change? How can you honor that? I think also deity can be included in this, which we kind of talked a little bit about with Persephone already. Um, yeah, and then I think there's like so much that can come from that. So I would say with that, it's like you kind of want to ground in on what archetype you're looking for and what that archetype can offer you. And then the next part of that is like, how do I do ritual around that? So maybe that ritual looks like glamour, maybe it looks like costuming, maybe it looks like the Persephone thing where it's like doing an action that that deity or archetype does. Maybe it looks like a just meditation of like, looking at that card, envisioning that card, and then like stepping into it physically. Maybe it's doing an activity that that archetype or that card would do, like this is very small aspect, I think, of the Queen of Pentacles, but like maybe you associate the Queen of Pentacles with gardening, which I think is very aligned with her energy, right? And so maybe you do gardening, and as you're gardening, you think about this archetype and you embody this archetype and you see what kind of comes up for you as you shift in that. So I think all of these examples of spells that I've given you are really about using your magic to not only insert some agency into moments of transformation that might be a little bit unsettling, a little bit stressful, a little bit anxiety inducing, but also inviting creativity, playfulness, and curiosity into the equation. And I am just such a big believer that like witchcraft, magic, spirituality is a vessel for creativity. And when we look at our magic and our perspective of our magic from the lens of being creative and as like a canvas for our creativity, I think that is both where the most fun happens, but also where the most transformation happens. So I hope that some of these ideas were interesting to you, inspiring for you. Maybe you want to play around with them now. Maybe you want to return to them when you need them, when you feel like you're in a moment of transformation. But these are the spell ideas that I have for you. So, in regards to the future and, through transformation, what happens, right? Like, I want to speak a little bit to what my intentions are for the podcast and what I would like to create in this space. Um, I would love for this podcast to continue to be something like it was today, a little bit of this is what I'm going through, this is how I would use magic to help me through it. Here's maybe some ideas to inspire you to be more creative and playful in your practice, and here's a page out of my grimoire kind of vibe. Um, I would also love for this podcast to continue to have a playful educational spirit to it. And as I think about other parts of my business, other parts of my platform as a magical practitioner and a creative person, um, the thing that I love most about working with clients, and you know doing readings for people and doing magical mentorship is being able to use magic to return you to your agency and inspire you in mundane moments, but also in moments of stress, right? So I would really love for this to continue to be a space where people can, you know, ask for witchy advice. The podcast is called Woes of a Witch Podcast, and initially I wanted it to be something where people could kind of write in like an advice column of being like, hey, here's what's going on in my magical life and like what advice do you have for me. I've been practicing magic for well over a decade now, and I have been reading tarot for longer, and I love offering this type of insight to people. And I would still love to do that. And you're still welcome to email me or message me if you have any questions that you want me to address on the podcast. But I think that I want it to be more connective, more intimate. I know so many cool people, and I know so many cool people from being online and sharing parts of myself online as a magical practitioner and like putting myself out there. And so I would love to have people come on this podcast who want to get advice as a conversation through their magical practice in essentially getting like a reading from me on the podcast. So, what I do in my magical mentorship sessions is someone comes in, they're like, hey, here's what I want to focus on. We look at your chart, we pull some cards, we chat things out. Um, and that's kind of what a general tarot or astrology session would look like with me as well. So I would love to give people readings on the podcast. I would love to give people magical mentorship live on the podcast. So if that's something that you're interested in, down to get a little bit vulnerable, down to get a little bit of a reading and advice, please let me know because I'd love to have you on this space. In addition to that, I would also love to interview some people because I know so many cool people. I already said this, but I'm going to say it again. I know so many cool people, and I've been really like lucky to be on Kim and Abby's podcast, Catabasis Cultura, twice recently, and had just the best time with them. And I would love to have them on my podcast. And I already mentioned Serena St. Sinclair, but on her YouTube. And I just think it's so fun to continue to have these conversations with people about magic, to get to know people's practices, to really platform different voices with different practices. And I would also love to have people on the podcast that aren't inherently like magical. Like I have some people that I've talked to about coming on that I think there's overlap and there's a lot of cool conversation that could happen, but is not necessarily like a witch or a magical practitioner. So that is kind of what I have planned is a little bit of mix of giving people readings, interviewing and chatting with guests, but also sharing a little bit of my practice more, things that are inspiring me, things that I'm working through. And yeah, and just a whole lot of magic. So let me know how that sounds to you. I'm excited. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. I'm going to end every episode with an oracle card. And so let's do that now. So, for those of you who haven't seen it before, this is my deck Mirror Muse. I'm going to be using it at the end of every episode to give you a little bit of weekly guidance, you know? I'm thinking that episodes are probably going to come out on Fridays. So, a little bit of guidance for the weekend moving into the week. So, what do our lovely listeners need to know? Okay, so I got the moon card, number 44. I'm going to read from the book and then I'm going to riff off of that because, like, these are my words. These are my words, and yeah. Like a full illumination, the moon swells into your reading with the message of completion. You have survived another successful cycle of transformation. Just like a full moon, sometimes it can be hard to have awareness when we are experiencing deep transformations. This card bookmarks the moment for you to return to once the intensity has waned. Your emotions are flooding your intuition. This moment is not for processing, it's for feeling and releasing, allowing the wildness of the lunar waves to create a choppy ocean of energy within you. As the illumination of this moment wanes, clarity will find you. Be patient and let go of urgency. I love that this came up because obviously it's talking a ton about transformation, but I think it's really speaking to something that I should address and something that I haven't addressed is that, like, change and transformation is very hard. It's very difficult. It's very emotional. Um, and so this card is for all of those people who are listening to this and are in the midst of it and cannot really think about what it looks like, what it means, how they want to harness it, magic to do around it, but just need to be present with it and just need to feel it. And as the card mentions, it's a bookmarker to come back to return to as the moon wanes. We're actually in a waning moon right now. We just had the full moon in Scorpio last week. We're waiting as we move to the new moon in Taurus. So remember these ideas for when you feel ready for them, but there's no sense of urgency, there's no rush. Just let yourself experience the way that you're shifting, the way that you're transforming, and just be present with that. So I hope that you enjoyed this reading and this podcast, and I will hopefully talk to you all very soon. Thanks again so much for joining me, and have a great rest of your day.